So hopefully you made it there to the link for special right triangles. We're going to start with our 45, 45, 90. Okay, so on our 45, 45, 90, the relationship is 1, 1, root of 2. So that was kind of part of the little song you just listened to, 1, 1, root of 2. They kind of kept repeating. The 1 and the 1 both represent the two legs of the triangle. So if it's a 45, 45, 90, we know it's an isosceles triangle. So the two legs are going to be representative of the ones. And then the root of 2 is going to be your hypotenuse. Now you might be wondering, how do we come up with the root of 2 as being our relationship here? And I've kind of written down here beside the triangle here that 1 squared plus 1 squared equals x squared. And when you go through that process, you end up getting 1 plus 1 equals x squared, which gives you 2 equals x squared. And then that would make x the square root of 2. So that's kind of how we're getting that relationship in terms of utilizing the Pythagorean theorem for this particular special triangle. Now we do have a couple shortcut rules that you can utilize. If you know that the hypotenuse is radical 2, basically you can take the leg times radical 2 to find the hypotenuse. And if you have the hypotenuse, you can basically divide it by radical 2 to find the leg. So if that's the method you want to use, that's a pretty easy shortcut method. I'm going to show you how to set it up with the proportion so that you really can't mess it up. And we're going to look at it in those terms because I feel like that's the easiest way for you to learn the process if you do know the ratio. So let's look at the first example. Here's our first example. So we've got 45, 45, 90. They're telling us that one of the legs is 4 radical 3, and they want us to find the hypotenuse, which is y, and the leg, which is x. Oh, it's kind of hard to see there. So in this process, what I'm going to suggest you do is once we recognize that it is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, I'm going to suggest that you write down your ratio. Well, from our song, we know our ratio is 1, 1, root of 2. Let's see if I can put it here where you can see it a little better. There we go. So what I'm going to then do is I'm just going to create a proportion here. So in my triangle, which two sides represent my legs? Well, we know that our legs are representative of what makes up the right angle. So I'm going to put 4 radical 3 and x. Those are my two legs. And I know my hypotenuse is y. That's my longest side. Now, from there, I'm going to then go ahead and solve my proportion. So to solve my proportion, I'm going to simply just cross multiply. So x times 1 is x. 4 radical 3 times 1 is 4 radical 3, which should make sense. The legs have to be the same. So x is 4 radical 3. If I'm going to solve for y, now I can do 4 radical 3 times radical 2 equals y times 1, which is just simply y. And if I multiply then 4 radical 3 times radical 2, that gives me 4 radical 6. And that's going to be the length of my hypotenuse. Okay, let's look at example 2. On this one, we're going to give you the hypotenuse. And on this one, we're going to try and find the legs. So on this one, we've got the hypotenuse is 2 radical 2. The legs are each x. So again, if we write down our ratio, 1, 1, root of 2. So 1 root of 2. I know that my legs here are going to both be x, and my hypotenuse is 2 radical 2. Then from there, I can then go ahead and solve my proportion. So x times radical 2, 1 times 2 radical 2 is just 2 radical 2. If I divide by radical 2 to get x by itself, the radical 2's are going to cancel, so x is just simply going to be 2. Again, that's going to make both legs, in this case, 2. So I don't have to resolve the proportion again to find the other x because they're going to be the same. Okay, let's go ahead and check out example 3. I'm going to have you do example 3 on your own before we go on to our 30, 60, 90. So on this one, they're telling us that x and y are my two legs, and 9 is the hypotenuse. So go ahead right now and see if you can set up your proportion and solve for the two legs. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go through this one. So my legs on this one would be x and y. That's going to go underneath my 1's. My hypotenuse is 9. That's going to go under the radical 2. If I then go ahead here, I'm going to just solve for y because it's closest here to the fraction we know. So 1 times 9 is 9. Y times radical 2. And then if I divide by radical 2, y is going to be 9 over radical 2. Now you can leave your answer in this form. You can also, if you rationalize the denominator, you would end up getting, again, by rationalizing, that means multiplying the top and bottom by radical 2. That would get you 9 radical 2 over 2. So this is acceptable. This is acceptable. If you typed it into your calculator, Aiden, what did you end up getting when you typed it into the calculator? 6.4. So we rounded it to the nearest tenth. 6.4 would have also been an acceptable answer. We know that x and y are both going to be the same because they are the legs. So your x value is also equal to the same thing. So you don't have to resolve the proportion. But again, all three of those values, depending on which way you wrote that, would be acceptable for your answer. Any questions on that? Okay, let's go ahead now and go to our 30, 60, 90 triangle. Okay, so in our song there that we just listened to, the ratio for the 30, 60, 90 is 1 root of 3, 2. So when you're setting that up in your picture, the 1 is always the shortest side. So they're in order from smallest to biggest. So 1 is the shortest side. It will always be opposite of your 30-degree angle. The square root of 3 will always be opposite of your 60-degree angle, which is kind of the longest leg. And then your 2 will always be the hypotenuse. So you want to notice some relationships here. Notice the hypotenuse is double the shortest leg, or the shortest leg is half of the hypotenuse, if you want to think of it in those terms. The longer leg is always radical 3 times the shorter leg. So those are kind of the shortcut things, but I'm going to again show you the proportion method because I think that's the easiest way to set these up. So then you don't have to memorize your different shortcuts there. If that helps you, you can do it that way. So let's look at example 4 here. So again, we've got a 30, 60, 90. I've already labeled kind of the ratios here. So 1 square root of 3, 2. The side opposite the 30 would go with the 1. Side opposite the 60 would go with the radical 3, and then your hypotenuse goes with the 2. So when you go about setting up your ratio here on this one, again, 1 root of 3, 2. The shorter leg is the 2 radical 3. The longer leg is the y. And the hypotenuse then is your x. And then once you've got your proportion set up, then it's just solving the proportion just like we did in chapter 7. I'm going to go ahead on this one and solve for y first. So 1 times y is y. 2 radical 3 times radical 3. Remember we talked about when you multiply a radical times itself, it just gets rid of the radical. So radical 3 times radical 3 is 3. 3 times 2, so y is going to be 6. So I now have my longer leg. I'm going to fill in 6 here where the y is so I can do the other ratio. So radical 3 times x equals 6 times 2, which 6 times 2 is 12. And then just to solve that, I'm going to divide by radical 3. So when I divide by radical 3, I get 12 over radical 3, which could technically be an answer we can keep. If we get rid of the radical on the bottom by multiplying by radical 3, I get 12 radical 3 over 3, which reduces to 4 radical 3. So probably the most reduced answer would be 4 radical 3 for that one. But again, if the radical's on the bottom, I'm not making you simplify that. If you put that into your calculator, if I did 4 radical 3 in my calculator and change it to a decimal, I would get approximately 6.9. So that would be another acceptable answer for that one. Go ahead right now on your own and see if you can find the values of x and y in the 30, 60, 90 triangle there. Do this real quick. So if you match up your values, underneath the 1, we're going to put the x. Underneath the radical 2, or radical 3, I'm going to put the 5 radical 2. And then my hypotenuse is y. So if I solve that for x, I'm going to get x times radical 3 equals 5 radical 2. If I divide by radical 3, x is going to be 5 radical 2 over radical 3. And then if I'm going to solve for y, I get y radical 3 equals 10 radical 2. And if I divide that by radical 3, I get 10 radical 2 over radical 3. Okay, so again, hopefully that makes sense to you there with that.